Welcome to another episode of Capacity. Today I'm here with Chad Jones, the president of Turbine Supply. They're a water pump component manufacturer in Lubbock, Texas. They've been in business for 40 years. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonny. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So you've had a really long and deep journey learning how to make stuff ever since you were a kid. Tell me about how you got started. Tell me about making stuff with your grandparents.
So I had two wonderful grandparents. One of my grandfathers was a doctor in Lubbock. The other one was a trim carpenter, and both of them just liked to build stuff. They liked to work with their hands. And, I learned at an early age, whether it was, building school projects with my grandfather or wiring things up at my other grandfather's house, how I didn't burn down his house is a miracle. I just liked to build things. And that translated into, 40 years later of building, kind of revamping a manufacturing company. So it's been a lot of fun over the years. I guess I'll start there.
What was your first experience building stuff in like a production setting?
So I remember I was a senior in high school and I went to work for a company. Actually, we made Christmas light clips. So it's a small company that was started in the early 90s, mid 90s. I started working in their shop. So we invented the Christmas light clip industry with a guy named Lonnie Gary, who's a great guy, great friend to this day. I learned about injection molding and how to do it very efficiently in high volume, about production molds and prototype molds and all that fun stuff, which kind of led me into a degree in mechanical engineering at Texas Tech a long time ago. Which was kind of the start of a passion of building things and how do you make things efficiently? How do you make things with the consumer in mind?
So right? you're going to school and working at this place at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. So I worked all the way through college and then after college for a few years as well, just because it really drove what I wanted to do. I love seeing something that I made and produced and was a part of sell on the shelf at Target or Home Depot or Lowe's. I mean, that was super cool to me.
What were what jobs did you do while you were there?
Oh, wow. I mean, I worked in the shop. We made prototypes. We made trade show displays. We made production tooling. So I ran a CNC machine for a long time, making aluminum prototype molds. And then we, for the most part, manufactured everything in the U.S. And then we started a transition to China a few years later. But it was a really interesting experience that I learned about how to produce things.
Where was the company at when you left?
Well, unfortunately, it was bought up by a private equity group and merged it with a few others and tanked the whole group, which is unfortunate because we were a great little company. Grew it from about $5 million in top line revenue when I started to over 40 million. And it just, I'm not sure what happened, but it tanked it after a couple of years. It was unfortunate.
You hear a lot of horror stories about how those types of transactions can go. Sometimes they go brilliantly, but what did it feel like for you being involved in that? Like, what was the transition like? How was it announced to you? What was your daily life like after that? And this whole time you're in college at the same time.
Yeah. I was actually just finishing up college and maybe I was out maybe 6 months or a year. I don't remember, but it was tough. I mean, it was almost like kind of the rug got yanked out from underneath us. It was, they brought in a bunch of consultants that really didn't understand what they were doing, and they were merging three companies together. No one seemed to be in charge.
All three companies did Christmas light clips?
There was one Christmas light clip company, one Christmas light decoration company, and one Christmas light company. And they thought it was a great idea to buy all three, merge them together.
So they try to make all the production happen out of your location or something?
No, they try to move everything to China overnight.
I see.
And where they really screwed up was they didn't take people off signature cards at banks in China. They were getting robbed. I mean, they were giving our customers instructions on where to put money. We were telling them something different. It was very disorganized. And it was a sad deal. We had a lot of good friends, a lot of good people. And then this was all around, it's about 2001. They just shut the doors one day. We just ran out of money and we couldn't free up money. It was a really unfortunate deal. It was very, very, very mismanaged.
So you were running production and one day everything just shut down?
Just shut down. I had suppliers calling me directly, what's going on? I said, I have no idea. I just know I lost my job today, So I was unemployed. It's the longest period I've ever been unemployed unemployed for 2 days, which was awesome.
Were you expecting to continue to work there after college if they hadn't shut down?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a great little company. It was really exciting. It kind of reminds me a lot of Fulcrum, kind of what you guys, kind of the vibe you put off. And I mean, we had some really wonderful people and great people, and we had some great ideas ahead of us. But that's just kind of how it goes.
Anybody try to resurrect it from the ashes?
We did. We formed a little group of, there were 3 or 4 of us that we kind of formed or went to work for a separate company and try to recreate the product line, you know, kind of working around our own patents and blah, blah, blah. We did that for about a year, and it did okay. You know, it moved me from the Lubbock area to the Dallas area, which is where I spent the next probably 20 years. But that was probably the best thing that came out of it. I mean, it never really got off the ground much.
When you say it didn't get off the ground, like, what do you mean? You were able to make some sales?
We did. I mean, we recreated some products and produced some things in about 6 months, got to market. It never, I mean, everything, it was very difficult. The original entity was still tied up in bankruptcy court. I mean, it was just really messy. So it never really got off where it should have gone. I mean,
how'd you fund all that? Like, that's not cheap to
no,
start a facility.
we had a company that we were actually all working for. That was another holiday company that said, "Hey, you guys had a really good thing. Come do it at our company again." And we did that. They weren't 100% behind it. It was I don't know. It was they funded it, but we were just employees for a period of time. It just wasn't a lot of fun anymore. We kind of sucked the air out of the room.
I see.
When we went belly up. So.
So then what next? What happened next? Still in manufacturing?
Still in manufacturing. So I went to work. There was a couple of companies up and down over a period of, I don't know, 5 or 6 years where I was traveling a lot overseas, working in manufacturing. I spent a lot of time in China and India doing lawn and garden tools, I did trampolines for a while and spas. It was just different, looking for that culture piece that I missed for a long time. And strangely enough, in I guess it was 2005 or 5, I think, I was flying up to Minneapolis to actually go fly to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I was sitting next to a guy in an airplane, kind of, what do you do? What do I do? Et cetera. And he ended up being the CEO of the company that I worked for the next 10 years. We sell plumbing repair products into every Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, and Menards all over the country. So we had a bunch of products. Again, spending time in product development, engineering, manufacturing, did a lot of different things, which was a great run. And then I worked for a company for about 5 years, doing large plastic molding. So temporary roadway structures, turf protection. So if you want to play a football game here at US Bank Stadium, and then the next day you have a Beyonce concert, we cover the turf. So we did a lot of that. I did that for about 5 years. Worked for a large trailer manufacturer for about a year, until one day I was talking to my wife and I said, I love what I do. I said, but I'm spending 70 or 80% of my time doing PowerPoint presentations for the private equity group. It just wasn't fun anymore, and I'd known of Turbine Supply for a long time. The owner at the time was a good family friend, great guy, great family. And so I approached him about selling Turbine Supply. And
you're living in Dallas at the time?
I was living in Dallas at the time, actually north of Dallas and Frisco, and Turbine Supply is in Lubbock. But I was from Lubbock originally. My wife and I kind of decided, and she was super supportive, that it was a good opportunity for us to get back to Lubbock to make life simple again. We had raised our kids in Dallas, and it was great, but it gotten a little crazy. Just too busy, both politically and otherwise. It wasn't us anymore. So I approached Tony about buying Turbine Supply, and he was ready to fish and play golf. And Tony's a great guy. He had been, his involvement in the business in the last several years had kind of waned, and he was tired. And the business kind of reflected that. We had some really wonderful people, and always have. We've had many employees that have been there for over 20 years, and they're fantastic people, and they do a great job. But the business was kind of stagnant. It was on this slope of a slow decline, right? That was about to fall off a cliff. So in June of 2021, we bought Turbine Supply, and really spent the next year or so understanding the business. How does it work?
Well, go back a bit.
Sure. Okay.
Buying a business is expensive.
Yeah.
Costs a lot of money.
It does.
You were an executive at a large company with a stable paycheck.
Sure.
going to a place where you might not get paid for a while, going into debt, I'm assuming.
Right, of course.
Like, were there other businesses that you had looked at? Was there something that stood out about a Turbine Supply? How did you arrive at a price that, Tony wanted to sell for and that you wanted to buy for? Like, how did you think about that entire thing?
Sure. I mean, it was, I'd been through, in the last few companies, been through a couple of private equity transactions, and kind of understood how the game was played, right? As far as how you value a company. And there's a lot of different ways, right? There's not one formula, but the one that I like is you look at EBITDA times an industry multiple, right? So we I got Tony's numbers and backed into what that EBITDA, that true EBITDA was. And I researched what a multiple was and for that industry. And that's how I came to a number. But again, I mean, I didn't fund it all through my own cash, and that was where my wife was I said, do you realize what we're risking here? And she's like, no, but you're made to do this. This is your thing. You're passionate about it. I said, yeah, I understand. But I've got a really good paycheck here. We've got some money saved. We're in a good spot. I said, if this thing goes belly up, they're going to take the house our kids sleep in. And she's like, I get it, which kind of I was shocked by, but she was super supportive, and that's what we did. I mean, I remember.
Were you nervous before you told her that this is what you wanted to do?
Hell yeah, I was nervous. But it was almost like I was looking for reasons not to do this deal. I truly believe that God would have closed doors and said, nope, this is not for me. This is not for me. And every door stayed open. It was, I remember when I went to the bank, I went to my local bank, who a good friend of mine had been my banker for a long time. I went to him. He was going to start a small business loan, blah, blah, blah. My dad, who had banked at Lubbock National Bank for 1 million years, said, here, let me call Eddie. I'll call Eddie. He's the CEO. I said, fine. Eddie called me that day. He said, Chad, what do you got going on? So I told him. He said, well, send me all your documents. I said, okay. So I sent him all my stuff. And literally 2 days later, he called me and said, it's done. I was like, what do you mean it's done? I said, I don't have no committee, no anything. Nope, it's done. I'm going to send you a term sheet by the end of the day, and it's done. I kept waiting for the other shoe to fall, and it never did. Right. And here 4 years later, here's where we are.
Well, what about the other side of the transaction?
Sure.
Usually when you're buying a business, you got to like negotiate a little bit. Hey, this is the amount of money you're taking out of the business. You got to add back salaries and all this other stuff. So there's some stuff to negotiate.
There's a lot of negotiation.
How did that go? Like, was finding a price difficult? Like, how do you approach that conversation of, this person operated this business for 36 years at that point in time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emotion that's involved. There's a desire to take care of your team, and like, are you going to even be able to do this? Like, what was that? What was that?
That was
like?
There was a lot of negotiation, a lot of back and forth. And Tony and I sat down on multiple times, and he had a number of his head that was far different than the number, my number really didn't change much. And it was really, from my perspective, it was much more emotional for him than it was for me, because it was very black and white for me.
How big was it? No numbers, but like, was it double? Was it triple? Like, how big of a difference was it?
At one point, it was triple.
Wow.
Right.
And what'd you say?
And I said, the math doesn't work. And here, let me explain to you why. And so I took his number, and I would plug it in and calculate out cash flow. I was like, we can't even service the debt on that. That doesn't make sense. I could put it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It doesn't matter. I couldn't even service the debt. Right. And so I think I really took a lot of time and explained to him why this math didn't work. And I finally got down to a point where here's where the math works. Here's where it'll cash flow. Here's where I can service the debt. And a lot of guys will look at it, well, if you grow it 50%, if you grow it 100 times or whatever, then you should. I said, well, that growth is on me, right? That's my value that I add, not the value that you add. So we kind of had to separate those two things, because I think we both knew there was a great business model there. It had been for 36 years. He'd done a great job running for 36 years, but he was ready to retire. And he didn't want to invest the hundreds and thousands of dollars back into it to improve it in systems and process and equipment and all the things. And I don't blame him, right? I wouldn't have either at that point.
How did that conversation evolve? Did it get less emotional? Did he like look for other buyers to try to get competing bids? Or
I don't think he was necessarily looking for other buyers. I think we had a personal relationship. Our families had a personal relationship, and he knew that I wasn't trying to screw him or anything else. I was just trying to be honest. But at the same time, I can't overpay for something that's going to put me in a position that I have to dig out of a hole. Right? We had to get to here's what makes sense. And I really do believe at the end of the day, I think we got to a fair number. I think that he was happy with, that I was happy with, that was fair. I mean, that's the whole thing is, to me, is I don't want to underpay and I don't want to overpay. I want to pay what's fair, right?
Yeah, we won't disclose any numbers, but
Sure.
we've talked before, and I know some of the multiples there, and that's what private equity firms would consider to be a high price. Like you paid what, in my opinion, would be a really good deal. I don't think that he would have been able to shop another deal out. But how do you mentally and emotionally handle that tension of, I know I'm offering you a really great deal and you're telling me that you want this much more and I have to spend X number of conversations getting you there? Like, how did you have the patience to kind of work through that?
I felt myself a little bit at times like trying to push the envelope. Can I pay a little bit more? Can I pay a little bit more? And I'm reminded of a friend of mine told me years ago, like I'm buying houses. I bought real estate years ago. He said, you make money on a house when you buy it. Meaning if you buy it right, you will make money at the end. So he said, never get emotional about a deal, right? Because if you start getting emotional, you'll make emotional decisions, and emotional decisions will lead down a path that you don't want to go, right? So I felt myself several times during those negotiations putting out too much. And I would go back to the numbers. These are pretty black and white things that here's the number, here's an interest rate, here's a multiple. I mean, you can plug in all the numbers and say, here's going to be my monthly payment on this thing, right? And will that cash flow in the current business model, right? And if nothing else changed and you ran the business the same way with the same inputs, can you afford that payment? And basically I got to a point where if I didn't grow it one single iota and ran it out, I would break even that year. And that told me that was about a fair number, right? So if you change that EBITDA multiple, you change that EBITDA, if it goes up, it's not going to cash flow. That's negative, right? Puts you in a hole you got to dig out of. And that's one of the things, I don't want to be digging out of a hole day one. So, does that make sense in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
How did you think about, did you go into this expecting to operate the business from day one?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think that was one of the misunderstandings that Tony and I had early on, was he didn't expect me to operate the business. He just expected me to invest in the business.
I see.
And I was going to be an operator. I can't invest and risk that amount of money and not be an operator.
So then, knowing that you were going to operate this business, how did you think about your own ability to understand what was going on? Did you do a bunch of tours? Did you have experience in sheet metal and CNC machining already or something? And what about the actual operations of it that was a risk for you? And
Sure.
what about the risk of business declining and now you're digging yourself out of a hole?
Sure.
And what opportunities did you see?
Well, my opinion on manufacturing, kind of, you look at it from an 80,000 foot view, manufacturing is manufacturing. I don't care if you're injection molding or you're die casting or thermoforming or sheet metal or stamping or machining. Manufacturing is manufacturing. The operations, flow, quality, et cetera, those are all the same regardless of manufacturing business, right? The overall process flow. Now, if you get into the individual operation of injection molding or CNC machining or mill turn lathe, et cetera, those are very different, right? But those things I can learn, and I knew I could learn, right? I've done all different types of manufacturing through the years, but I wasn't as concerned about that because we had people that had worked there for a long time. They didn't appear to be going anywhere. They appeared to have a good attitude. They were wanting to learn, wanting to grow. So I wasn't as worried about that. Now, the question about the business declining, that's always a risk, right? But I looked in the water well space, and kind of my investment thesis around that is, as long as you and I are on this planet, we're going to need water, right? Oil and gas is very fickle. It's up and down. It's too risky for me, right? We have a little bit of oil and gas business, but not a whole lot. I figured there was more upside than downside. As I looked at kind of how the business operated, I had toured it a few times. I just saw a lot of inefficiencies. I saw a lot of ways that we could do things better. And I'm kind of an old factory rat at heart. And I love kind of walking around factories and looking and understanding and seeing how people do things. But, I could see pretty quickly there was a lot of opportunity. And when I asked Tony one day, I said, what capacity are you running at? And he said, we run about 95%, which I knew was not true. Right? Maybe with the current workflow and the current way of doing things, that was probably about right. But knowing we could very easily change a few processes and get that down to about 80% really quickly.
What about the other components of it? You said you thought people were going to stay, and the customers were going to stay. Did you keep Tony on as kind of a bridge, or how did you think about that transition?
Tony was ready to fish and play golf, and
from the day one of the sale,
he was ready. Right. He was ready.
Was that a part of your thesis in terms of buying the company? Because a lot of times owners that sell don't want to leave. They want to kind of stay around.
I think there are different schools of thought, right? And I don't know that one's right or wrong. They're just different. I realized pretty early on that I did need his help to understand the business, and he was on call. He was a friend anyway, and he would have been regardless. But I needed his help to understand the business, the customers, and the history of what had happened. But I realized pretty quickly that the changes we were going to need to make over the next few years, as far as process flow, people, customers, suppliers, how we transact business, was going to be vastly different. And there was going to be not as much value he could add from that perspective. So I say he wasn't really involved, but he answered the phone call. I would call him a couple times a week for the first couple months, and then it drifted off. He would show up, once a week to see how we were doing, and that drifted off pretty quickly as well.
Just as he had some trust that you had things figured out.
I don't know if I'd say I had things figured out, but it was, I knew pretty quickly what I didn't know. And he hadn't been involved as much in the last year or two anyway.
So what was that first period like? There's a big burst of excitement.
Oh, sure.
Everything is new.
Sure.
But oftentimes that first year can be really hellacious.
It was tough. I mean, I tried to bankrupt it in the first year. Just we made some accounting mistakes and things that, I'm a dumb engineer by trade. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a finance guy. I understand. My uncle told me many years ago, he said, you don't want to grow a business too quick. And I said, why is that? He said, because you're running out of cash. And I learned that very, very quickly in the first year. We were growing. We were on a kind of a hockey stick growth path. I realized that we weren't accounting for things properly when we started running out of cash. We were putting things in the wrong buckets, and I wasn't aware enough to know.
Were the buckets already pre-established? Like they were just putting in the same buckets as before?
No, I was changing things. I mean, a lot of this
see.
was my fault. I was changing things. I didn't think of where I was putting things to. I was expensing things when I should have been putting things to inventory, and I didn't know the difference.
I see.
Right. And our accounting person at the time was focused on other things. And personally for her, and she was a wonderful person, we just made some mistakes, and it was tough. We went from thinking that we were making a ton of money in the first year to where we actually were losing money, right? But the problem is I was paying bonuses based on us making money. I was buying equipment based on we were making money. I was making other investments, right? And we come to find out at the end of the year, we were not, and it was tough.
So what did you do? Did you tap into a credit line?
Oh, yeah, we absolutely did. So we pulled on our line of credit. Once we kind of realized what was going on, we got a new accounting person who we needed to dot every I and cross every T. And we did that. And I needed to understand better where every single dollar was going, and kind of had I got my MBA the hard way, in the very expensive way. So now I think we have we have a very good handle on what's going on in the business financially. And that was tough. It was a tough learning. It was tough on my soul, right? As far as my ego, it was hard.
What were like the top 3 habits now that you rely on to give you a good sense of cash on profitability that you look at regularly? So
we have different dashboards. We call them material margin. We look at, if we strip out labor, we strip out overhead, what are we making based on the raw material? How is that number consistent or not consistent, right? And we've gotten that very, very consistent. We look at like daily quotes, weekly quotes, daily sales orders, weekly sales orders. Are we driving enough activity outside the business so we can get those sales orders through the business and out the door? We look at P&L every month, every quarter, every wire, every check I sign. I know exactly every dollar that goes out of the business, every dollar that comes in the business. I do all of the invoicing personally because I want to see every invoice that goes out.
Back to that material profitability metric. Why is that? Why did you discover that was so important? Or how did you?
It's labor rates can vary as far as labor amounts can vary. How much labor you put in, you put out. Maybe it takes longer, it takes less, in the shop, et cetera. Your expenses as a business, whether it's electricity, overhead, those can vary from month to month. But if you're making, it's just a factor of, are we underquoting or overquoting things, right? As a factor of raw material. That seems to me to be a pretty good barometer of how are you doing, and how stable is the business. And I can tell you, as I look at it over time, you can see where we made some changes, back in 22 and 23, where we were bringing that number up, and now it's plus or minus a point every month, right? It's very, very stable, which tells me if that's stable on the front end side of the business from a quoting standpoint, then everything else we have to manage is on the expense side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk internally about how there's 4 areas in manufacturing. You got to be able to know how to make the stuff. You got to be able to understand the finances. But you also have to understand culture and sales.
Sure.
How did the culture change after you took over? Who did you hire? Were there any kind of sad departures?
Yeah.
Like what happened after that?
That was tough. I kind of took it upon. I looked back when I started this thing through my career over the years, and I said, what were things from a cultural standpoint that I liked at different companies I was at, and then what were things at companies I was at that I didn't like, that didn't work well, and I tried to do more of the things that were good and less of the things that were not good. And I looked at very quickly, what is our team like? So I met with every single person for an hour when I first got there. And they were very open with me about the things that they liked and didn't like. I found out pretty quickly there were a handful of people I think that had one foot out the door and were ready to leave. I think it was primarily because there was no real active leadership on a day-to-day basis. They didn't know where they stood. They didn't know what the goals were. They would show up at 8, leave at 5, and there were no goals, right? It wasn't a team anymore. So we put in employee handbooks. We put in kind of the table stakes for running a business. How
was that received?
I think it was skeptical at first. I think everybody was very skeptical at first. They didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who they were, and that was okay. But I kept telling them, if you'll just stick with me, we'll figure this out. We worked on the benefits, so we pay 100% of our employees' healthcare, which is an expensive bill every year. But I tried to show them, I'm working for them. I mean, that's my goal. I have a family to provide for, as do they. We put a profit sharing plan in place, which, I realized from years past, they hadn't gotten a bonus in many, many years. And it was very subjective, right? I like you, I'll give you $500. I don't like you, I'm going to give you 50, right? Which I don't like to play that way. So we created something I'm super proud of, which is our profit sharing plan. We pay it out quarterly, and it's all based on the profit of the business. If the business makes money, then they make extra money.
How do you share that information with them? Like, how transparent are you about that?
I'm very transparent with it. So we don't get down into the detail level of the P&L, but the way it calculates is it's based on, so if I have a guy that makes $10 an hour and a guy that makes $20 an hour, the guy that makes $10 is going to get half the bonus of the guy that makes 20, which I don't have any $10 an hour guys, but you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Where that translates to, when I put it into my spreadsheet, it calculates number of hours of bonus. So Sonny, say you're making $20 an hour, and for that quarter, I paid 20 hours worth of bonus. That would be a $400 bonus to you, et cetera. And we do that for every single employee, and it's down to the penny. I mean, there's no funky business. It's square true. And so we report out every quarter on how much we made in bonus hours, and then we pay it out, which we're about to do it for Q2.
How has that changed the team? Like, have they reacted to it?
It took them a couple quarters to figure it out, and one guy came up to me, Antonio came up to me one time and said, so basically we're kind of like owners in the business. I said, exactly. Right. Because I looked around the business, and this is, how should you incentivize your sales team? How should you incentivize your operations team? How should you incentivize your shipping team, et cetera, right? And in every company I've ever been in, if you measure people in two different ways, two different groups in two different ways, at some point it will come into conflict every time. It might not be today or tomorrow, but at some point they will be in conflict. So I kind of zoomed out and I said, how am I incentivized, right? What are my goals? Well, it's profit. At the end of the day, as the owner of the business, it's profit. There's no other metric, right? So I said, well, what if we measure everybody in the same way? So we did. And what that did was, I think it caused people to work better together. I think they're not working for themselves anymore. They're asking for help. They're sharing jobs, because at the end of the day, if you're not successful, I'm not successful. And if I'm not successful, you're not successful. And we tried to build that teamwork across the organization, and it's worked pretty well. I think last year we paid out a good number of bonus hours, which was great. I think we paid 180 hours last year, 160, 180 hours, which is not bad, right? It's about 4 weeks worth of bonus. So, but everybody gets it. They spend money like it's theirs. I don't monitor the day-to-day. Did you buy this screwdriver? I'm not going to spend my time doing that. But I want them to think if they need that screwdriver, they can get that screwdriver, but it comes out of the bonus dollars, right? It comes out of the profitability of the company. It's worked out pretty well. But from a cultural standpoint, to further answer your question, it was a big change, and we did have to make some tough decisions. We had a sales guy that was there for 30 plus years, and, he was just, by God, not going to get on board. He would hand type out his quote, print it, scan it, sign it. And he was, by God, not going to do anything different ever. And
he told you that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how he thought he was going to win this argument, but he did. And, I worked with him for about 6 months, and it just wasn't going to happen. And I knew there were going to be some big changes coming. We didn't even know about Fulcrum at that point. Right. So, but I knew we had to do something different, and it was just not going to work out.
You hear from a lot of entrepreneurs that in that moment, the emotion you feel is fear.
Oh yeah.
Fear that person is going to take a bunch of people with them, or it's going to cause like a cascading waterfall of everybody leaving. Like, how did you have those emotions? How did you deal with them?
I mean, I had the emotions of, he'd been there a long time. He's an individual, and he relies on the income to support his family and all. That's very, very important to me. And I respect that. Being on the employee side for 20 years with young kids, et cetera. I get that. But I realized pretty quickly it was, you hear this a lot. It was more of a cancer in the organization, right? There were more underlying things, right? And it was just not a good fit for him, and it wasn't a good fit for us. But you do fear, is he going to leave and take customers? And at some point you just jump off that bridge and you just do it, right? And regardless, because it's going to be far worse keeping him around. But those are really hard decisions to make. It's the worst part of my job, right? In any management role, it's hard. And if you ever find yourself being callous to that, you're in the wrong role, because you should always take it very, very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. But speaking of sales, you've grown quite a bit. You've doubled in size in the last few years, and have done it really efficiently. So on that fourth bucket on sales, how have you done it?
Really, it was, I'll say, in the trying to say yes to customers. I think for many years it was, well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. It's too much work. It's not really what we do. We would find a way to say no. And I tell Tammy and Ken all the time, they're our account managers, if a customer asks, the answer is what? And they all yell out of their office, yes. Right? It might be a yes, but it might be a yes, and, but it's always a yes. Because if you keep telling a customer no too many times, eventually they're going to quit asking. Right? So we try to find a way to yes. Even if our customer calls, I was working with a customer last week that we were a little bit high on a part, and I'm trying to work with him and say, hey, if we do a few more, we can get the price down. I want to find a way to say yes. Right? And in most cases, we always do. Going out and talking to customers, answering the phone. We track unanswered calls. We record calls. We understand what customers are asking for. We do follow-up emails. One of the things that was interesting is we would send out quotes to our customers all the time, but then we would never follow up. The problem is, do you want your salespeople doing follow-up calls or new quotes? Right? It's a struggle because it's taking time away. And then I worked with a friend of mine at a company called Conversion Solutions to integrate with Fulcrum to do an automated follow-up. So now it's an email coming from me. Looks like it's coming from me, and it asks, hey, where are we at on this, and this? So it's using technology as your friend and letting it work for you. So that's a long-winded answer to your question of how do we grow sales. It's really by saying yes, being proactive, being there, rebranding, getting our name out there. We created a web store. We rebuilt the website. There were a lot of things.
All of that, though, is wrapped up in this wrapper of, for the first year you grew and it cost money.
Oh yeah.
Right? Takes cash to grow.
Yes, it does.
Unless your cash conversion is instant somehow, right? I wish. Yeah. But people take a little bit longer to pay you. You got to pay your employees every other week. You got to pay your bills and your loans every month. Mm-hmm. So walk me through that process. How did you recover from that first knockdown? And then how did you learn how to grow and not burn all that money and get to where you are today?
Sure. I say it's still a struggle, right? It's a daily struggle. I think the first thing, when we realize the mistakes is I tell all my guys the same thing, and I live the same way. If you make a mistake, we're all gonna make a mistake. There's three things you do. One is you own it. I'm not gonna say, well, it's Sonny's fault. Sonny, no, I did it. Chad did it. So step one. Step two, you figure out what you did wrong. What mistakes did I make? Why did I bucket it there? And then step three, you fix it. I'm not going to ask you to fix my mistake. I'm going to fix my own mistake. So I did the same thing. I understood what I did wrong very, very, very quickly. I got with my CPA, understood, kind of how it should work and where my false assumptions. And then I went to the bank, told the bank what was going on. I'm not trying to mislead anybody. It's very true, very honest. Here's the mistakes. And they were very supportive and have been. And took a draw on the line of credit. I made sure everybody stayed paid and all my vendors got paid. And then we worked through it. We kind of started over again. And then over a period of time, we were able to pay some of that off and keep working and converting sales. I'm not going to dwell on the mistakes that we made because that's not fixing them. But I think in the last few years, it's been a roller coaster. Every month it's a roller coaster. As we're still growing our business, we're still bleeding cash all the time. Right. And it happens all the time. As my wife tells me all the time, that's what a line of credit is for. Right. You run it up, you pay it down. You run it up, you pay it down. That's just the cycle of the business. And the more I got comfortable with that, the easier it was on me. Right. Because I can look at every month and go, okay, here's coming. Right. We got a bunch of big bills coming. We're going to draw on it and then we'll pay it back next month. And we do. Right. That's just kind of part of it.
Did the team have to take some time to acclimate to that as well? Because most long-term businesses that have been around for 40 years, they don't have that attitude. They have an attitude of just maintaining, maybe growing a little bit. Growth has a lot of cost to it. New machines to learn, new mistakes to make, the anxiety of having debt and paying it down. Like how has the team embraced it?
Well, the team is been very, very supportive. We have some really, really great people. I think many times they look at me like I'm crazy. Like, you want to do this, you want to move this machine and put this over here and tear this down and build this up. I think they think I'm nuts half the time, but I really do have a plan. And I think after we've done it a couple of times, and I think they've have a little faith in me that I'm not completely crazy, that I think they've trusted me more and more. I think part of it, our general manager, Marcos Gonzalez, he and I have worked together for 15 years. So this is our third company together. He works in the business. I work on the business. We argue. Our wives joke that we share a brain, which means he uses it one day, I use it the next. But we work very, very well together. And I think they have a lot of faith in him too, because he kind of distills a lot of what I want to accomplish down to something that's actionable. But he gets it, right? But I think everybody realizes we're not going to get to where we want to be. We're not going to grow without doing something different. What's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So if you want a different result, you got to do something different.
One of the hardest things long-term, no matter how big or small you are or where you are in the cycle, is managing your emotions. How do you, what do you do to help you with that?
It's funny. It's hard because I am passionate about what I do. I'm a pretty black and white guy. I like to look at numbers and judge things by the numbers. But, my family, I live in a house of all girls. I have two daughters that are, one is almost 19 and one is 20. And, living in a house of girls with all the emotion that goes with that is taught me to kind of manage my emotions, right? I'm going to be in control of my emotions rather than my emotions being in control of me. And it's hard. Some days are easier than others, some days I just want to go and take a nap on the couch. Right. But it's hard, it's especially when this is your business, this is your baby, this is your cash, your first step out. I cannot fail, right? Failing is not an option. So it is, I'll say physically, I don't work as hard physically, but mentally and emotionally, I've never worked harder.
So we've covered finance and business and, sales and your own psychology. the only one we're missing is just the core making things, the operations, how things flow.
Yeah.
What did you change there? Did you leave things mostly in place? Did you buy new machines? Did you change processes? What happened?
So historically, our business, we've been very good and keyed in. If you need 1 of something, 5 of something, and 10 of something, you need it out of a super duplex or some crazy material, and you need it next week. We're really, really good at that. We've never been as good at doing the higher volume things. And I always thought we were missing a big segment. I'll talk about that in a minute. But there were several process changes that we made early on. We broke out multiple line orders into multiple jobs. And, Fulcrum actually really forced us to do that, which is good operating practice anyway. Whereas before we would get an order with 6 lines on the job, and we would have 1 operator do all 6 things, which that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't, but are they in the best position to do those jobs? So we really understood what our capabilities were at each piece of equipment, at each operation, and then tailored those jobs, right? We had to understand our costing. Some operators and some guys are better at doing certain things than others. You have to keep in mind, we don't have any button pushers, right? All of our guys are skilled craftsmen. I mean, these guys are so good at what they do, and they're holding half thou tolerances, plus or minus 1 thou tolerances over a 10-foot span. I mean, these guys are really, really, really good at what they do. So how can I put processes and systems in place to help support them, right? To make their jobs easier, to make their inspections easier, to make sure they have the right material at the right time in the right condition, right? So we made a lot of changes as far as that goes, to make things simpler on them. So they knew what was next. They could complete their job and move on to the next. They weren't scrambling to find material or tools, et cetera. So we tried to make things easier on them because I want them focused on doing their job.
What other things changed?
Well, so I told you we were focused on lower quantity production, and I always felt like we were missing the mark on higher volume things, meaning 500 pieces, 1,000 pieces, et cetera. We couldn't be as cost effective. We weren't set up to run that way. So earlier this year, we invested in a new mill turn lathe, the DMG Mori. That is, I look at it this way. I have a shop full of Chevrolets, and Chevrolets are great vehicles. They run super fast. I mean, they're great. They're sturdy. They're built to last. I don't know. I think that's a Ford thing anyway. So a DMG, in my opinion, is more of a Ferrari. It's it costs as much as one too, by the way. But they run super fast. They're super tight tolerance. So we've been setting up to run high volume production. We have. So we've run probably about 10,000 parts through that thing in the first 3 months. And I mean, it's moving. And we've got our times down. We got our costs down. We're burdening it a little bit differently to get those costs down. But we've got a new young operator who's running it, and he's doing a fantastic job. It doesn't take anything away from the rest of our business, right? This is something just kind of like a bolt-on division, for lack of a better term, that has allowed us to get much, much more competitive. I've priced it against like import things out of China. In most cases, I can beat China prices because of the efficiency, right?
Even before tariffs.
Even before tariffs. So after tariffs, I mean, who knows? I mean, we're seeing a lot of uncertainty right now, not only with our customers, but with our customers' customers.
Right.
We were talking about that the other day, is the farmers, a lot of our stuff goes into ag, and a lot of farmers are nervous right now. You know, how are the tariffs going to impact their business, good or bad? And they're just nervous. So they're not making purchases. They're holding off on purchases. So the pump companies that we sell to and the repair shops that we sell to, they're doing the same thing. Everybody's a little bit nervous. We have seen an uptick in requests. I mean, our quote volume is through the roof. I think people are looking at the U.S. What's the U.S. backup plan? So we are very competitive, extremely competitive. So I think the whole tariff thing, if you want to get into that, is going to really help our business, which is what it was designed to do anyway.
Sure.
But so far, it's had a good impact.
New division, longer run work, simplifying things. Where was the resistance to that? Who pushed back against what as you took these really skilled craftsmen and added new process for them?
I don't think anybody really pushed back. I think the one that pushed back the most was probably me. It's another risk, right? It's putting out more money. It's putting out more risk. I mean, can we really make this pay off, right? And, you know, we ran all kinds of calculations. I'm a big spreadsheet guy. And every spreadsheet I would run, every way I would look at it, said, yeah, this is a good investment. And as we kind of look at the first 90 days of it, we've proven that out. We've proven, I'm the first one to try to prove myself wrong. But it's worked out so well. Our customers are getting on board too. So we're able to lower lead times significantly. We're able to offer very, very competitive pricing with the same level of quality that we've done for the last 40 years. It's kind of just a new part of our business.
I think the most impressive stat, the one that I like hearing the most, is that you've doubled your revenue, your top line, but you've really only hired one or two more people.
One person.
One person.
Our incremental headcount has gone up by one, and we've doubled top line revenue, which is super cool, right? I mean, that's attributed to our team. I mean, the guys are much more efficient. They're running fast. They're running hard. They're working their butts off. But they're also reaping rewards from that as well, as we all are.
Yeah.
It also shows it was very inefficient to begin with. This is not rocket science, right? This is just simple blocking and tackling of getting things almost just in time, to getting people the right tools beforehand to do their job of clearing roadblocks out of the way, right? This is not difficult, but it's thinking about things in Turbine Supply that had never been done before and never been thought about before. And that comes from different experiences at different companies. And more importantly, it's our team being very, very receptive to that, because they, like you kind of alluded to, they could have very easily said, hey, we don't want to do this. This is way different. And it was way different, but they've all been super supportive and willing to hop on board. And I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes, and I'm the first one to own it, but, my hat is off to my team, and they've done a great job.
So what's next?
It's a good question. Turbine Supply has been great, and it will continue to be great. We're going to keep adding machines, adding equipment. We've got lots of room to grow. I've got a lot of land to build buildings on if we need to. I'm looking for, what are other smaller companies out there that are either in the water pump space? Maybe they're not in the water pump space. Maybe they're in the machining space. Maybe they're in the injection molding space. Who knows, right? Of where we can take these same methodologies, these same great group of people and ideas, and we can find that business that maybe has been owned by the same guy for 50 years. He's done a great job as a fantastic operator. He's ready to go fish and play golf, right? Where can we invest our technology and experience and drop into that organization to double that or triple that, right? With some really great people that are already there. That's kind of my next goal. Another small business to kind of roll into the family and do the same thing. It'd be pretty exciting.
I know I've just been peppering you with questions, but
please.
A lot of people are thinking about selling or thinking about buying, right, and there's really not that much content out there on the process of doing that. Yeah. And thank you for sharing all that information.
Sure. It's not, I mean, you can make it as hard as you want to make it, right? But it doesn't have to be hard. It's really just two guys or a guy and a girl or whoever's sitting down at a table, and let's just talk through it. What are your goals? What are my goals? And how do we make them align? I mean, it can be that hard.
Anything else that we haven't talked about that has been really meaningful along this journey that bears mentioning?
No, I mean, I think, we haven't talked much about Fulcrum, which is fine. That's been a huge key to our success and of helping us get organized. I love that your team, Sonny, thinks in a similar way to my team, and we work well together. You see things before I see things. It's been a natural fit for us. I'm a diehard Fulcrum user and will be forever. You guys do great work and are super supportive, and we couldn't do it without you. So you're a huge key to our success. And we're happy to help you guys any way we can as well.
Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on and telling your story as well.
Thanks for the trip. It's a beautiful day out here.
Yeah, it is. If people want to find you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can email me at chad@turbinesupply.com. You can go to our website, turbinesupply.com. We're on social media. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Call the office. I'm usually there.
Awesome.
Pretty simple.
Thank you, Chad. Congratulations.
Thanks, honey.